One of the clearest trends in the first half of this year was the slowdown in growth in the Eurozone. And clearly that has a major impact on the UK, given the Eurozone is, at least for the time being, our major trading partner. About half of our trade in both exports and imports goes to the Eurozone. So that's been a negative for the UK economy. But there are some fundamental issues within the UK economy which are cause for concern. The UK economy is very dependent on retail sales or more generally consumer spending for any sort of growth momentum. At the moment we're seeing relatively weak investment spending. We're seeing government still driven by the need for austerity and therefore slowdowns in the pace of growth of government spending. We're running a net trade deficit. For sustained growth in the UK, you need to see a buoyant consumer and buoyant consumer spending. We did see that over the summer, and retail sales picked up quite sharply over the summer months. Why was that? Well, we had the World Cup, we had the royal wedding, and we had some extraordinarily good weather. And those three things boosted consumer spending. More people spent their holidays in the UK, perhaps because of the weakness of sterling and the good weather, than perhaps in previous years. Indications that inflows of tourists from overseas were also very upbeat, again, possibly because of the weakness of sterling. So we saw strong retail sales and hence consumer spending over the summer. The problem with that looking forward and thinking about the sustainability of that is that consumers' finances are still under a great deal of pressure. If you look at the decade since the financial market crash, then it has been the worst decade in recorded history for real wage growth and real income growth. And that is continuing as we speak. If you look at the moment at the increase in average earnings, in total it's running at about 2.6% year on year. The inflation rate is just about the same, 2.5%. So consumers are seeing no increase in their real wages and generally not in real incomes after a period of 10 years of enormous pressure. So what is sustaining consumer spending? What boosted consumer spending over the summer? Well, by and large, it was borrowing, unsecured borrowing, borrowing on credit cards. And that is a very fragile foundation for growth going forward. And the risk is that when we go through the winter months, if consumers retrench in terms of their borrowing that they've undertaken, then we will see a slowdown in the pace of growth of retail sales. And if retail sales and consumer spending growth more generally do slow, then with investment looking suspect, with the government retrenching, with a net trade deficit, there are no other elements of demand which are likely to take up the running. What the Bank of England has said in its quarterly forecast is that it thinks that the relatively upbeat growth of the second quarter will be continued on a quarterly basis over the next 2 years. Hence they raised interest rates and have further interest rate rises penciled in. But that sustainability of growth must be questioned. And we think that if we see continued pressure on consumer finances in a world of uncertainty affecting other elements of expenditure, then the risks of UK growth and the risks compared to, say, the Bank of England's view of where the economy is going, those risks lie to the downside.